On this channel, I've made videos for players wanting to reach 1000 and 2000 ELO, but I haven't given much love to the people in between those two ratings that might want to reach 1500 ELO. In my video on how to reach 2000 ELO, I included a list of tools and strategies you can use to improve. But what stops most people between 1000 and 2000 ELO isn't a lack of training, but a lack of understanding of the game. So in today's video, I'm going to be going through all of the principles that I tell my students that are in and around 1500 ELO on how to improve their game. I guarantee most of these principles are things that you haven't heard online before, as they come from 5 years of playing experience and not just regurgitating things I hear other people say. By the way, you can find my coaching in the description below if you guys are interested, but let's get into some principles. Find opening weaknesses on OpeningTree.com. Okay, to be completely honest, there's not actually that many principles when it comes to learning openings. I mean, the advanced way of approaching openings is just to learn opening theory. But I thought it would be lame if I gave you guys zero opening advice, so here we go. Basically, a lot of people spend time practicing their entire opening repertoire when only a few sections of it actually need fixing. To find out what needs fixing, go to OpeningTree.com, which is free by the way, type in your username and fill out all the parameters and put in a 3-month time period, and there you go. OpeningTree will tell you all of your win rates for all of these openings. If you're consistently losing in one opening, the likelihood is you need to learn theory for it. I'll also leave a link in the description below from a video of mine where you guys can learn to make and practice an opening repertoire. But if you don't have the time to make an opening repertoire, you might be interested in the sponsor of today's video, ChessMind.ai. Most courses obsess over memorizing hundreds of opening lines, but ChessMind is built around something different, understanding positions and not just remembering moves. The goal isn't just to know theory, it's to know what to do when theory runs out. That's why the courses on ChessMind only take around an hour to complete, because the priority isn't on memorization, it's positional understanding. For just $7 per month, you can unlock over 50 courses on ChessMind, plus access to their AI coach, personalized puzzles, and training videos hosted by Chilean Grandmaster Maurizio Flores. And with the link in the description, you guys can get 20% off your purchase too. So pairing OpeningTree with ChessMind, you should be able to fill in all of the gaps with your opening repertoire. If you've never seen the position before, invest the time to understand it. Maybe I lied, this is technically a principle that can apply to the opening, so here we go. Most people, for whatever reason, only seem to be able to justify spending a few minutes of their time calculating in the middle game or end game, but why not the opening? If your opponent plays a move you've never seen before and you don't know what it does, or how it changes the position, you should absolutely invest time into understanding it. Too many people are just blitzing out moves because they're principled and know they should be good, but this is exactly how we make avoidable mistakes. We should always be trying to not only improve our position, but understand it too. Take this position for example. This was actually a game I played in my The Difference series versus I Want Checkmate. Knight a3 is a move that I have never seen before, and I was actually considering playing queen takes b2 because I thought it was just a dumb move, but I invested some time into thinking about it, and realized if queen takes b2, there's knight b5, and the game plan is not so straightforward anymore. In fact, on Lichess, at my level, 30% of people play e5, giving white a +3 advantage, and 10% of people play king d8, giving white a +2 advantage. That's 40% of people at such a high level of chess who simply throw the game away because they didn't take the time to think about the move knight a3 and how it changes the position. Moral of the story is, if your opponent does something weird out of the opening, take your time into understanding it. It's the only way that you're going to get better at chess. If you're stuck between two moves, play the more principled one. The next principle applies for every single game phase. It's pretty often that I find myself with two candidate moves and not being able to figure out which one to play. This most often occurs for me in classical chess, where I have so much time to find moves that I end up finding too many moves and can't decide which one to go for. Let's take this position for example. Although it's quite obvious, it's good to use an obvious example, then a harder one. We have two choices here, play d takes e5 or jump our knight back. How do we decide which one to play? Well, let's just think about it principally. If we play d takes e5, we're allowing white to take towards the center, kick our knight away anyway, and open up their rook file, which is not something we want to principally allow. If we play knight e7 though, white taking on d6 would activate our bishop, their rook file never opens up, and now we're threatening to win the e5 pawn. You can see how we had two options, but we want to pick the one that is more principally sound. But let's level this up for a second. What if we have one move that is principally sound, and we've also calculated it to be working for us, and another move that is not principally sound, but we've also calculated it to be working for us? What then? Let's look at this position from a classical game I played. In this game, white is down a pawn, but it's also white's turn to move. In this position, I was stuck between two options. Rook takes a5, which is the principled move, winning the pawn back, but I also thought knight c5 was an interesting, unprincipled move trying to stop bishop d7 from coming. When you decide between two moves, and can acknowledge one is more principled than the other, it immediately should be considered as better. Not because it necessarily is, but because years of common chess patterns would suggest it is. When we allow our calculation to override what is ingrained so deeply in chess, if we've at all miscalculated, we will just be playing a worse move. This is not to say you should never go against principles, but if you calculate two moves to be of similar quality, you should opt for the more principled one as it's likely going to be better. In this position, after knight c5 and b4, I thought I had queen b5, which would win a pawn, but I'd missed knight fd5, rook takes a5, and knight c3, which prized the queen away from the rook's defense and loses the game. Fortunately for me, my opponent didn't play that line, but you can see that when we go against chess principles, we open the door up to complexity and counterplay for our opponents. So if we have two moves of similar quality, why risk it? Just play rook takes a5 here instead of knight c5. It's the best move in the position. If you don't have a good piece move, you have a good pawn move, and vice versa. The next one is a super simple principle that you can carry into any game you play and it'll work every single time. The idea is simple. Chess works in phases of play. I'm not talking about openings or middle games, I'm talking about sequences of moves. You subconsciously play small combinations of moves at a time. You'll play some piece moves, then you'll move a pawn, then some piece moves, and so on. This is such a straightforward concept, but not enough people are actually thinking about it when they play. Let me explain. Essentially, if you have a good piece move, you should make it. If you don't have a good piece move, you should make good pawn moves until you have more piece moves. Let's take this position. Black just played queen b6. Do we have a good piece move to defend the b2 pawn? Sure, we have queen c2, rook b1, or queen b1. Let's say rook b1 is played. Now, black plays knight bd7. Think to yourself, do we have any good piece moves? Sure, we have castles, queen e2, or knight e5 to play. So let's play one of them. After castles and c5 from black, do we have any good piece moves? Sure, we have knight e5, queen e2, and now rook e1 as well. Let's play rook e1. After c4, do we have any good piece moves? Yep, we can play bishop c2 quite comfortably. Let's speed forwards with this thought process until we hit a wall. Bishop d6, bishop g5, queen c7, queen e2, and rook e8 from black. You'll notice now, all of those good piece moves we mentioned before are already played. Do we have any good piece moves now? Maybe you could argue bishop a4 is a good piece move, but it doesn't seem to make great progress. Our bishop is already on a strong diagonal. It should be no surprise to you, once we run out of good piece moves, the top engine move is a pawn move, which allows our pieces to have more good moves. This often comes in a pawn break. e4 is the best move, so let's play e4, d takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, and queen takes e4. After knight f8 defending the threat, you'll notice because we played that pawn move, we suddenly have a bunch of good piece moves again. There's queen g4 and rook bd1. You see how once we split the game up into these phases with a flurry of piece moves followed by a well-timed pawn move, we never run out of plans in our game and always have something to do. Using this simple method will pretty much never get you into any trouble. And remember, having a plan is better than having no plan. Don't just look at what a move does, look at what it leaves behind. A big problem I see a lot of people have is mindlessly making a move, not realizing what it leaves behind, and only thinking about what it actually starts doing. Let me show an example. Black just played rook e8 in this Roy Lopez position, and now white has a couple of options. I want to first look at the possibility of d5. Is this a move you would consider playing? Most people, when considering d5, would only ask what it does. It freezes the pawn structure, comes with tempo on the knight, and makes the black bishop stare into a pawn chain. These are things lower rated players would notice about d4. But what are we missing? Well, we miss what d5 leaves behind. First of all, the pawn on d4 held good tension on the e4 pawn. Black's knight was frozen because if it moves, a pawn would be lost for black. We also know if black were to take our central pawn, we'd just replace it and black loses central control. When we play d5, we leave that behind. Most players wouldn't even think of this when considering d5 as a candidate move. When we play d5, we also leave the defense of the c3 pawn. Now, if our pawn is ever undermined by black's c-pawn in the future, we'd have to recapture with another central pawn, which is obviously worse than recapturing with a non-central pawn. Let's look at the continuation of knight a5, bishop c2, and c6. Now, because our d-pawn left behind the defense of our own c-pawn, black can undermine our center. But what if not d5 and let's say d takes e5? Well, first of all, we leave behind the defense of c5 and e5, which is typically why you don't want to be the one trading off your central pawn. We also leave behind an open d-file by doing this. Does this benefit us or black? Probably black, as they were the ones struggling for activity. We also leave behind a newly opened f8 to a3 diagonal for black's bishop, which was actually struggling for space before we played this move. You see how looking at what a move leaves behind is equally as important to what the move actually threatens to do. What if we do nothing though? That's important too. What if we leave the possibility of this tension breaking in our opponent's hands and play knight bd2? Well, did we leave anything behind? We no longer have support of the d4 pawn with another pawn. We've half opened the c-file, but apart from that, nothing else. We then want to add regular calculation into this. But the main point I'm getting at here is there are so many considerations to make that you naturally skip over because you don't see them as important. What a move leaves behind is equally as important as what it starts doing, especially if you can't undo that move. Take twice as long thinking about permanent moves. You can actually go back to the previous example to show off this principle, as it is also a permanent move. A permanent move is something that you physically cannot take back and leaves a permanent effect on the board. Advancing pawns, capturing pieces, forfeiting en passant rights, forfeiting castling rights, and castling are the main ones. For the sake of simplicity, let's just look at our previous example to demonstrate. Let's go back to the line where we captured on e5. This is a piece capture and has permanently affected the position. We want to spend extra time on these kind of moves, because if they were wrong and we only realize it later, we physically can't undo it. If we play a knight move and realize the knight move was bad, we can just drop the knight back to the square it was on before. But with permanent moves, we cannot do this. It's a super straightforward concept that I probably don't need to explain much more than I already have. It's even what I would describe as a bad habit from most people, mindlessly making permanent moves without giving them the time they deserve. When in a better position, calculate the furthest forward moves first. Now, there are obviously going to be exceptions to this rule, but it's a good mindset to be in when you're attacking in chess, or just think that your position is a little bit better. The move that will affect evaluation the most are the most progressive moves in the position, that advance a piece the most. Let's take the Scandinavian position for example. Black just played bishop f5. Notice how the most progressive moves in the position are the best ones. Bishop c4, the furthest possible yet logical square for the bishop. Knight f3, the furthest square forwards for the knight. Or g4, the furthest possible move for the g-pawn. Let's continue with this line to explore this further. What about g4 and bishop g6? Well, guess what the best moves are? f4, the furthest square for the pawn to go, attempting to trap the bishop. Bishop c4 and knight h3 are also decent moves. It's worth mentioning, the most progressive move will not always be the best one. In this position, bishop g2 and knight ge2 are great moves too. But this principle is to calculate the most progressive ones first, as if they are working, you want to make sure you're not overlooking them. Let's play f4 and e6 now though to keep trying. Do we have any more super progressive moves to continue with here? Maybe there's bishop c4, but it doesn't seem very threatening. It's important to note the most progressive move will not always be the best, but by considering them first, we were able to reach a +1 position in the Scandinavian. So many chess players have unbelievably good theory, but then once they're in an advantageous position, they just completely capitulate. This happens because they opt for conservative moves over progressive ones. So if you're in that group, change your calculation process to this one and you're going to have much better results. Any free pawn, even a piece, is a gambit. So we can all agree on what a gambit is, right? A gambit is when you temporarily or permanently sacrifice a pawn or sometimes a piece, and in return, you get some kind of compensation like activity or central control. But what if I told you that this can apply in the middle game and end game as well? Let's take this game for example. It's actually a classical game I played with the white pieces. The best move here, and the one that I played, is queen takes a5. It allows white to go up a pawn and gives an evaluation of +1.5. The problem with grabbing free pawns is it often compensates the opponent in several ways. Let's put queen takes a5 on the board. The first compensation they receive is it's their turn to move. Every time you grab a free pawn, your opponent will be compensated in this way. The second compensation that they have is that their rook now lines up with your queen. In this case, they have extremely minor compensation for the pawn that they just lost, which is why the engine likes queen takes a5 so much. But let's look at a more complex example. This position is from another classical game I just played recently. Black has just played long castles, leaving two white pieces attacking their c5 pawn, whilst just the lone black bishop defends it. If we use the ideology of treating every free pawn like a gambit, we can identify potential danger instead of mindlessly grabbing it. If we play knight takes c5, what compensation does black have? Well, again, it's their turn to move. They are also compensated in the fact that the black queen now x-rays the knight on c5. These two forms of compensation link up to cause problems for white. Black can simultaneously take advantage of the fact that it's their turn and the x-ray by playing c takes d5, tearing down white's center whilst attacking the knight on c5. You might think that white can just play knight takes d7 and escape this threat, but then d takes e4 comes, pinning the knight to the king. You see how, by treating free pawns and pieces like intentional gambits from your opponents, we were able to identify the possible dangers in accepting. In this position, after knight takes e4 and rook takes d7 check, white is actually better by +1 after king c2, but I'm not an engine and evaluated this position to be slightly better for white, if not at all. Instead, on move 20, I avoided the danger and found king c2, preparing to play knight takes c5 or queen b6, trying to pick up loose pawns, which is a much safer and calculated approach. Moral of the story is there will almost always be some kind of compensation for your opponent when you grab free pawns or pieces. Identify the danger first and make sure that you can consolidate the position once all of the dust settles. a3, b4, and a6, b5. This principle may seem a little bit weird, but I promise you it's a really good habit to get into. Let's take this position for example. Black has just played a6, threatening to play b5. It's quite funny that in almost every single situation, it's a good idea to play a4. No, really, it's almost never a bad move, and will always be one of the top moves the engine recommends. The reason this exists is because the move a6 from black is a one-move threat. a6 does not do anything other than prepare b5. So if you play a move defending their one-move threat, they kind of just cancel each other out. By the way, just in case it wasn't clear, if we play something like knight f3, the game is not lost, but they'll play b5, gambiting their pawn. If we refuse and play castles, for example, b5 displaces our knight and black is better as they undermine the defense of our f4 pawn. And if c takes b5, a takes b5, and bishop takes b5, black can play knight takes e4, knight takes e4, queen a5 check, knight c3, and bishop takes c3 check to win material. In every line, the tactic will be different, but the threat of b5 will always be present with a6 on the board. But in general, why allow any of this when you can just mindlessly defend with a4? There are a few exceptions to this, but generally you're not going to get yourself in any trouble if you just mindlessly follow this rule. h6 or h5. In similar fashion, there's another situation that comes up in a lot of 1500 rated players' games. Take this position for example. White has just played h4, threatening to trap our bishop on the next move with h5. Should we play h6 or h5? The answer is always h5. There are almost no exceptions to this rule either. h5 is just going to be better as it not only gives the bishop room to breathe, but also blockades white's h-pawn whilst threatening to undermine the g4 pawn. If g takes h5, we play rook takes h5, and suddenly we have a target on h4. If g5, life goes on, and white's pawns are frozen on the king side and will struggle to keep their king safe. If the tension isn't broken with queen d2, we just play h takes g4, f takes g4, and not rook h4 blundering bishop g5, but something simple like knight f6, developing a piece and asking white how they plan on handling their long-term weaknesses. Let's look at how h6 is different to h5 though. Well now, because we didn't simultaneously blockade white's h-pawn, they will play h5 themselves, forcing bishop h7. They'll play this extremely slowly, but the main point now is that not only is our bishop less active, but white's pawns are not frozen. Once white is ready, they will play g5 and threaten to shred open our king side with all of our pieces cramped up on that side of the board. It's not completely losing or anything, but it's just something that we want to avoid if we can. And with that, those are all of the most important principles that I've learned along my chess journey that I think apply most to players trying to reach 1500 ELO. If you guys have any principles that I didn't mention in today's video, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll try to heart some of your guys' comments. So if you're wanting more principles to follow, check out the comments section where you can see what the community thinks as well. But apart from that, I hope you all enjoyed today's video, I hope you all learned something, and I will see you all in the next one.